Joe Biden's winter of darkness. President-elect Joe Biden recorded a holiday message for the nation. Unlike the holiday message of President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump, Biden's message did not mention Jesus Christ, our Savior, or anything of a Christian nature. Biden conducted a 10-minute speech relating the ills of the country and what he saw as his mandate to fix those ills once he takes office.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I take questions, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. This has been one of the toughest years we've ever faced as a nation. And the pandemic, the economic crisis, calls for racial justice.
Now, we've got several lies here by President-elect Biden before he even starts his speech. First, he refers to an economic crisis. The economic crisis was instigated by the severe lockdown by Democrat governors across this country, preventing Americans from going to work or from sending their children to schools. In states run by Republican governors who have not instituted such severe lockdowns, the economy is rebounding and children are back in school. This despite the fact that most of the high COVID mortality rates are in states run by Democrat governors. The other lie is more serious. Racial injustice. Well, he's referring in particular to the riots that started in May of this year from the death of George Floyd. George Floyd died in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a Democrat-run city, a Democrat-run and hired police department, and with a Democrat mayor and a Democrat governor in Minnesota. So, all of the rioting, looting, arson, destruction, murder, statue pulling, these incidents of rioting and mayhem have all been instigated by the Democratic Party. They ordered their followers from Antifa and Black Lives Matter to go out and burn and loot and destroy in some kind of unspecified social protest. In some cities, they're still rioting and protesting, but they're doing this in cities and states run by the Democratic Party. So if you're rioting against systemic racism, you must be rioting against the systemic racism of white Democrats oppressing your big city, whether it's Atlanta, Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Baltimore, or any number of big cities that have been run by Democrats into the ground for 60, 70 years.
Historic and punishing wildfires and storms. So this season of reflection carries a much deeper meaning than it usually does. Over 320,000 lives lost to this virus.
That's assuming that every single person in that total actually died from coronavirus. They had one person who was killed in a motorcycle crash. He was listed as a COVID fatality because in his autopsy, they found coronavirus.
Jill and I send our prayers, as I'm sure all of you do, to all who are facing this dark winter with an empty...
Now, why is this a dark winter? Joe Biden resembles the Night King from Game of Thrones. It's the winter of darkness, it's the dark winter, and instead of Americans banding together and uniting to fight these various ailments, Joe Biden won the presidency by exploiting people's fears, by terrorizing Americans that President Trump was not going to have a vaccine available before the year was out. Well, it's Christmas and we have 2 vaccines, just as President Trump predicted. But people like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said don't take any vaccines developed under President Trump because Orange Man bad. That was not a sane policy, but that was the official position of the Democratic Party.
Seat at the dinner table where a loved one used to sit and talk and laugh and reminisce. Our hearts go out to all of you who have fallen on hard times, through no fault of your own, I might add.
through the fault of Democrat governors and mayors.
Unable to sleep at night, weighed down with the worry of what tomorrow will bring for you and for your family. We're especially grateful for the healthcare workers on the front lines, the scientists, the researchers, the clinical trial participants on the front lines of the vaccine who deserve our thanks.
Not Operation Warp Speed, which partisan Joe Biden will not credit or thank, because dividing America over a nonpartisan virus was the #1 goal of the Democratic Party this year. Recall back in 2009, President Obama had a very slow response to combating H1N1 swine flu. Yet in 2009, not a single Republican official politicized swine flu. Not a single Republican official attempted to make political gains to increase their power over the swine flu, because that would have been insane to use a virus in 2009 to attempt to increase your party's power. The Democratic Party of 2020 had no such moral qualms. The Democratic Party worships power. They don't worship or respect the United States Constitution, our culture, or the people of the United States. Power is all Joe Biden and his team wanted, and power is what they got.
And who delivered us scientific breakthrough. And for all of you who have deployed family members in the military, we know what it's like. We know what that experience is like, how difficult it can be, especially at this time of the year. Our family knows your sacrifice, and our hearts are always with you. But keep the faith. Throughout this year, we had to forego many of our favorite holiday traditions. We have as families, as...
Biden continually touches his face and rubs his eyes through his speech. This is a doddering old man who doesn't know where he is half the time, apparently.
Communities and as a country. For the Bidens, we usually have 20 to 25 family members over for Christmas dinner, and then the immediate family, 14 of our kids and grandkids and their spouses.
So that's why Hunter Biden can't be found.
For coming down the stairs on Christmas morning, but not this year. Like we did over Thanksgiving, we all have to care enough for each other that we have to stay apart just a little bit longer. I know it's hard. We have a long way to go, but we're grateful that we've got the vaccine. And yesterday, in an effort to instill some confidence in the vaccine...
Why do you have to instill some confidence in the vaccine? Oh, because for the past 4 months, Kamala Harris, your vice president, and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo went out and did every interview attacking the notion of any vaccine developed under Operation Warp Speed and President Trump. Kamala Harris laughed her way through interviews, mocking the idea of taking any vaccine before Joe Biden was president. So we have to restore confidence in taking vaccines because of the Democratic Party, which mocked, jeered, and ridiculed the notion of a vaccine before Joe Biden could administer it.
I had my shot administered in public, and I got a chance to thank all those nurses and docs at Christiana Hospital for what they've been putting up with and doing for so long.
Wow, so for national unity, you actually could have thanked President Trump for his early leadership in combating the virus. Recall that in February's State of the Union address, President Trump asked the Democratic Party to present a united front to help combat coronavirus. That's right, President Trump mentioned coronavirus and the threat it posed back in February. The reaction of the Democratic Party was to tear up his speech.
I look forward to the second shot, and I have absolute confidence in the vaccine. But we're in short supply. Taking the vaccine from a vial into the...
Now this is just insane. The vaccine has just been rushed to production. It's a miracle, a Christmas miracle, that we have 2 vaccines available before Christmas. So instead of saying, wow, we have a vaccine that didn't take 5 years, 10 years, 25 years to develop, instead it's all doom and gloom from the president-elect.
Arm of millions of Americans is one of the biggest operational challenges the United States has ever faced. We're 300 million people. And we're going to take many more months for that to happen. In the meantime, this pandemic rages on. Experts...
Almost as if masks and social distancing have no effect on a virus spreading across the world, just like it does every year whenever there's a new flu strain. And amazingly, even if you order people locked up in their homes in Democrat-run states and cities, they still got to go out and get gasoline and get food and interact with other people. So what is the point of all this mask wearing if it's shown not to have any effect? One of the earliest cities to require all of its citizens to wear masks was New York City. The order went out April 15th of this year. The entire city of New York complied, and they had one of the highest mortality rates and infection rates of coronavirus of the country. And that was after they all started wearing these masks. So is the mask just a placebo? No one will tell us.
Experts say things are going to get worse before they get better, notwithstanding the fact we have the vaccine.
Now, let's talk for a moment about how Joe Biden constantly refers to the experts. Numerous science journals endorsed Joe Biden for president because of his repeated assertions that he will follow the science and that President Trump does not follow the science. This despite the fact that Donald Trump immediately mobilized the CDC run by Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. You may recall President Obama relied on the CDC as well as Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx in the same exact manner, but no one politicized the CDC or Drs. Fauci and Birx under Obama. No reporter tried to create daylight between Fauci and the president in 2009 because there was no political agenda at the time. Now, this year, the press politicized a virus in the hopes that it would help increase Democrat turnout at the polls. And yet, aside from the presidential race, not a single incumbent Republican in the House of Representatives lost their seat. So all of this agitation by the news media to divide Americans over a virus failed.
As you all know, we're averaging a death rate of close to 3,000 people a day. That means we're going to lose tens of thousands of more lives in the months to come. And the vaccine won't be able to stop that.
I saw an article where people were dying of drug addiction in California at a higher rate than coronavirus. So really, why is it necessary to continue panicking the American people after you won the office of the president-elect? Because you have to understand what motivates the Democratic Party. As they increase their power, they have to take away your power and your freedom. Joe Biden worships power, as does everyone who is going to be hired by him to administrate the Biden administration.
So we'll still have to remain vigilant. We need everyone to mask up, stay socially distanced, avoid large gatherings, particularly inside.
Unless it's at a Democrat-encouraged riot, but then there are no social distancing requirements when you're expressing your rage at the behest of a Democrat mayor, city council, or governor.
We need to work in a bipartisan way.
Oh, you mean like when Joe Biden said in his August speech in Pittsburgh that Trump supporters were all neo-Nazis, white supremacists, white nationalists, and armed right-wing militias. Yeah, that was very unifying, Joe, to tell us that every Trump voter was a neo-Nazi. You are a liar, sir. There is nothing unifying about your message.
That's the only way we're going to get through this in tough times. We have our first hint and glimpse of bipartisanship. I applaud the Congress.
Now, what he's actually referring to, you have to translate Biden speak. In his definition, bipartisanship means that the Republicans elected in the Senate and the House do precisely what Joe Biden says in the manner that he wants it. That's his definition of bipartisanship.
economic relief package that included funding for vaccine distribution, much needed temporary relief for workers, families, and small businesses. In this election, the American people made it clear.
He's actually not truthful about that. For instance, the assistance for small businesses is simply an IRS tax deferment. That's not assistance. What's assistance is to allow the businesses to reopen in Democrat-run states where they are forced to be closed.
They want us to reach across the aisle and work together.
Oh, how generous of you. So you used a nonpartisan virus to divide this nation. Now that you've obtained the power you sought, now you're going to talk about reaching across the aisle. Mr. Biden, you are a liar, sir.
On matters of national concern to get something done. And I believe that to be the case from the very beginning of my campaign, and I'm happy to see members of Congress heeding that message as well from their own constituents. Leaders in both House and Senate, both parties, deserve credit for making the hard compromises to get this done. But like all compromises, it's far from perfect.
Such as military aid to Egypt. Why do they need so much money to buy weapons from Russia? Why aren't there strings attached to that military aid to Egypt? We just give them a blank check and they're going to go buy munitions and military equipment from Russia. So your party spent 4 years accusing President Trump of being a Russian agent, and yet he's the only one objecting to all of this foreign aid in a supposed COVID stimulus relief package. Why is President Trump the only one standing in the way of taxpayer money being thrown across the world willy-nilly?
But it does provide vital relief at a critical moment. However, as I've said all along, this bill is just the first step, a down payment, in addressing the crises, more than one that we're in.
So Joe Biden hasn't really adjusted his speeches or talking points since the news that more than one virus are available for release at Christmas. The reason for this is simple. His administration wants to be able to claim that they were the ones who developed a vaccine and a response to the virus. Probably 10 years from now, your children will read Democrat-authored history books in school referring to this as the Biden vaccine. So remember the rule for partisan Washington. You can call it a Trump virus and blame President Trump for every single death by COVID, but you have to call the vaccine a Biden vaccine, and that's what history will reflect 5 or 10 years from now.
There's a lot more work to do. Early next year, I'm going to put forward to the Congress my plans for what comes next. We'll need more help to fully distribute the vaccine. We're going to need more testing in order to be able to open our schools. We're going to need more funding to help firefighters and police, many of whom are being...
Now this is a switch for Biden because you have to follow the course of how he recommended reopening schools. Democrats, as a whole, wanted schools locked down for 2020 because they wanted parents to be forced to stay at home to watch their children. If parents aren't working and they're forced to stay at home, the theory goes, they would blame the president at the time, President Trump, and then show up at the polls to vote Democrat. So in July, Joe and Jill Biden created a video message where they referred to how they were going to advocate spending billions of dollars on remote learning to keep children at home indefinitely and never reopen schools. Jill Biden said that they could not reopen schools until COVID rates went down. That was in July this year. Then in August, suddenly Joe Biden's campaign was releasing ads specifying how his team was going to get children back into the classroom and get teachers back into the classroom. Why did this message change from July to August? Because Biden's team saw the polls where parents wanted to get their children back into school. So when you see Joe Biden now backtracking on that, he's now saying we can't reopen schools until we increase testing. This is not a consistent policy or message.
Laid off as I speak. And the same with nurses, risking their lives on the front lines. The same for millions of hurting families who are unable to put food on the table, pay rent, or the mortgage.
Now, why aren't they able to do these things? Because they have a Democrat governor in New York, a Democrat governor in Minnesota, Democrat governor in Michigan, Democrat governor in Washington, Oregon, or California. Democrat politicians would prefer it if all Americans were dependent on government assistance and that we never worked again. If every American is permanently unemployed, the Democratic Party's power is absolute. And when Democrat politicians look at a country like Venezuela, they don't see Venezuela as a failure. If the government is the only one distributing toilet paper, you will be grateful that you get one roll of toilet paper per month for your family, because to Democrats, Venezuela is a utopia of socialist ideology. To them, it's a success story where the state is in complete control, the state tolerates no dissent, and the state's power is absolute, and no one has any freedom to say or do anything against the state. To the Democratic Party, they wish to transform the United States of America into the next Venezuela, the next Cuba, the next Mao's China.
Unemployment's extended for another 10 weeks. It's going to take a lot longer than that. But Congress did its job this week.
You could almost take his comments criticizing Congress as a rebuke of Nancy Pelosi. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi has given repeated interviews after the election stating how she was not willing to sign COVID stimulus relief before the election because it would be perceived as helping President Trump. So for purely political reasons, Nancy Pelosi murdered people. People died because she could have signed this COVID relief back in September or October. But for political reasons, the Democratic Party did not want anyone getting stimulus relief that they could then attribute to President Trump. Democrats killed people to increase their power. Remember that when you watch Joe Biden talking about the winter of darkness and our darkest days are ahead of us. This is what the Democratic Party wanted. A fearful, divided America, polarized into camps of victims, all begging for relief from the powerful government, which will be run by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris next month.
And I can and I must ask them to do it again next year. But even with the changes in approach I'm going to put in place in late January, people are still going to be getting sick and dying from COVID. I'm going to tell it to you straight. I'm going to tell you the truth. And here's the simple truth.
Hunter Biden is a corrupt criminal, and he had to donate 10% of his ill-gotten earnings to the big guy. That's the straight truth. The question is, who is the big guy that Hunter Biden had to give 10% of all of his kickbacks to? Tell us that, Joe.
Our darkest days in the battle against COVID are ahead of us.
So, this is Biden's unifying message, and I can't fault him for this because, from all appearances, the American people responded to his message of this being a winter of darkness. He won the 2020 election, and now all we're going to hear about is how dark it is, our darkest days are ahead of us, gloom and doom. You must turn to Washington, D.C. and the enormous federal government, the deep state swamp, for your relief.
Not behind us. So we need to prepare ourselves to steel our spines. As frustrating it is to hear, it's going to take patience, persistence, and determination to beat this virus.
See, he's still talking as if President Trump and Operation Warp Speed to develop these vaccines did not exist. As far as Joe Biden's concerned, the healing and hope will not happen until he takes office.
There'll be no time to waste in taking the steps we need to turn this crisis around. My administration will start to do its part on our first day in office with masking requirements, a new strategy for testing, accelerated protection, protective gear. And we're going to challenge Congress.
Now, this is something that Biden has emphasized at every speech this year. He has campaigned on the notion that Americans do not have enough personal protective equipment, that there are not enough ventilators, and that he will be making sure people get all this equipment, hand sanitizer and so forth. The problem is no one told Joe Biden that as a nation, we collectively fixed those distribution problems back in May and June of this year. But he still keeps repeating complaints from the start of the coronavirus epidemic. It's almost as if his brain is stuck in the past, and he doesn't understand that all these hospitals have the PPE they need. Every state has all the ventilators they need, despite New York's Andrew Cuomo trying to request 20,000 ventilators. And he's still campaigning on complaints dating back to April and May. Can someone tell Joe Biden that we have enough ventilators and PPE in December 2020? Because he apparently is only knows whatever someone hands him.
And the American people to step up immediately as well to do their part. As with the relief bill passed by Congress, is another challenge which my administration will confront on a bipartisan basis. A massive cybersecurity breach against the U.S. companies, many of them, as well as federal agencies. And there's still so much we don't know, including the full scope of the breach or the extent of the damage it has caused.
Now, why is it important to talk about the Russia cyber attack against federal agencies in a holiday message about coronavirus? Someone in the Biden campaign did a focus group where it said, hey, we'll score additional political points if we bash the outgoing president on this cyber attack. Now, one of the worst cyber attacks in our nation's history occurred under Obama-Biden, where the Office of Personnel and Management had their systems hacked by China. And all of the personal information of every federal employee, their social security numbers, their personal info, where they lived, it was all leaked to the Chinese government under Obama-Biden. This massive breach was not publicized by the American news media as a grave threat to the nation, because the American news media wanted to help Obama and Biden. So while the Biden campaign is looking for means to stick one last dagger in the outgoing president, you have to wonder, didn't Joe Biden run on returning our country to the notion of a civil president, a president who is never rude, who respects the office, and who returns us to the dignity of the office of the presidency? That's what Joe Biden based his whole campaign on. So what do you do when you take over from one president to the next? You don't criticize the outgoing president. You simply talk about your plans for the future. But someone in Biden's campaign said, let's find a way to anger Americans one more time in this presidential campaign after the presidential campaign and blame President Trump for this data breach.
But we know this much. This attack constitutes a grave risk to our national security. It was carefully planned and carefully orchestrated. It was carried out by using sophisticated cyber tools. The attackers succeeded in catching the federal government off guard and unprepared.
Just offhand, one of the agencies that was compromised was the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy does not deliver a single kilowatt of power. The Department of Energy had their networks hacked and completely plundered because they handle nuclear energy policy and our nuclear weapons. Now, if I was running the federal government and I had all these secrets on networked computers at the Department of Energy, you know what I'd do? I would pull the plug on every network cable at the Department of Energy, and I would tell the officials there, you will not have anything on a computer network, because if you don't have anything on a computer network, it cannot be cyber hacked. And that would seem to be an obvious basic for protecting our country's nuclear secrets.
Foreign actors have been working this breach since late last year, at least last year, setting the landscape to compromise our systems, scraping up sensitive information from our world-class tech sector.
This is a 10-minute speech.
And from private businesses.
Why is this such a big
United
chunk
States
of
government
a
agencies.
10-minute holiday speech?
The truth is this. The Trump administration failed to prioritize cybersecurity.
So this is Joe Biden's unifying message of bringing our country together. Thanks a lot, Joe.
It did that from eliminating or downgrading cyber coordinators in both the White House and at the State Department, to firing the director of Cyberspace and Infrastructure Security Agency, to President Trump's irrational downplaying of the seriousness of this attack.
Now, this has been a repeated charge by Joe Biden since this news came out the other week, that President Trump is hiding, that he, as he just said, is irrational. And Biden's complaint, oddly enough, is identical to what op-ed opinion columnists at newspapers like the Washington Post and the New York Times and the talking heads on CNN and MSNBC have charged, that President Trump, because he hasn't given a long public speech on these cyber attacks, that he's somehow in hiding and having an irrational response. I would think the prudent response of the President of the United States to these cyber attacks would be to quietly and discreetly have a response to the hackers in question and the nation state in question. Biden's complaint is that Donald Trump should have gone out before the American public and detailed every single secret response that we are conducting to these hackers, detail every single classified program to punish the nation state responsible, and that Trump is in error by not revealing all of these things to the cyber attackers themselves about what our response is going to be. I would dispute the position of President-elect Biden. President Trump is doing the precise thing he should, which is to be silent and not to say what our response is going to be or what our response already is. It's insane for Joe Biden to think that we need to publicize what our precise response is going to be to those who hacked our country's systems. But that's his complaint. Why is this important? Joe Biden doesn't actually make this complaint himself. Someone at his staff read the op-ed opinion column at the New York Times on this subject, summarized it in 2 to 3 sentences for Joe Biden, and then put it under his nose. Joe Biden goes out last week or 2 weeks ago and presents this as his criticism of Donald Trump. And why is this important? Because Biden has done this throughout 2020. He'll present an opinion column based on anonymous sources from the New York Times as his personal criticism of Trump, and no one calls him on it. It's like he's back to his old ways of plagiarism. Joe Biden, for instance, was wrong for 2 straight months when he criticized Donald Trump for his early banning of travel from China and Italy at the onset of the coronavirus crisis. The reporters at the nation's newspapers crafted a fake news story based on anonymous sources who to this day have still never come forward. The anonymous sources claiming that Trump should have acted a month sooner. And then Joe Biden was handed a summary of this. He immediately made this the central attack of his 2020 campaign, that Trump should have acted sooner. But Biden asked us to forget that for 2 straight months, he said that President Trump was racist and xenophobic for blocking travel from China and Italy. Biden said that for 2 months at every rally appearance that he had. And then suddenly he started campaigning that Trump had not acted soon enough. No reporters called him on it because the reporters helped Biden craft his response. From that early example through the rest of the campaign to today, every one of Joe Biden's criticisms of President Trump was written for him a week or 2 beforehand by some reporter at the Washington Post or the New York Times. Not one criticism that Joe Biden has voiced of Donald Trump this year has been written or conceived of by the president-elect himself. Someone else makes the criticism for him, he repeats it, and then it's reported as news that Biden has this opinion. But so far this year, and this is truly frightening, he has not expressed any opinion that is actually his. Someone else writes these criticisms for him. And we know this because they'll have the story out, and then 2 weeks later, Biden is making this attack as his own. And he did not come up with these things on his own. Is the man capable of forming a single thought without someone helping him?
Enough's enough. In an age when so much of our lives are conducted online, cyber attacks must be treated as a serious threat by our leadership at the highest levels. We can't let this go unanswered. That means making clear and publicly.
So Biden's attitude is, a nation-state such as Russia conducted an attack against this country, and therefore you can't let that go unanswered. But when President Trump said that China permitted air travel to continue after the discovery of the Wuhan flu, while locking down the internal provinces of China from travel to and from Wuhan, Joe Biden said it was wrong for Trump to blame a nation-state for unleashing Wuhan flu across the world. So can President-elect Joe Biden explain why on the one hand he condemned Trump for blaming a nation-state for conducting an attack on our country with the Wuhan flu, and yet he's saying Trump is not acting soon enough by this attack from a nation-state with the cyber attack? Obviously, these are contradictory stances.
Who is responsible for the attack and taking meaningful steps to hold them in account?
Why shouldn't Trump hold China to account for this attack on us and the rest of the world? There was a paper authored by John Bolton a few months ago stating that the reason we can't hold China to account is because too many nations do trade with Beijing. That is not a sane or factual response to what China did to the world. China should be held to account for what they did, but you'll never see Joe Biden do that. Maybe if he appoints Hunter Biden as our ambassador to China, Hunter Biden will hold them to account, right?
Initial indications, including from Secretary Pompeo, Secretary of State, and Attorney General William Barr, suggest that Russia is responsible for this breach. It certainly fits Russia's long history of...
Perhaps we can ask the wife of the Moscow mayor if she knows anything about this breach, because I understand she knows the Bidens very well.
Reckless disruptive cyber activities. But the Trump administration needs to make an official attribution.
Well, actually they don't, sir. Our response to a secret clandestine cyberspace attack should also be a secret clandestine response. The reason Joe Biden is making this demand, which was never made to any president previously, is that someone wrote this in an opinion column. The news media creates controversy out of nothing with fake news. Joe Biden is handed that summary. He repeats that as his criticism, even though the entire nation can plainly see that he is repeating something that was in the news from a week or two ago. And yet, we're told this is an original Biden criticism. No, a reporter sitting in their cubicle created this criticism, and someone at Biden's staff thought it would sound good if he would read the criticism out as his own, and therefore sound like a commanding leader. This is not leadership. This is a sore winner.
This assault happened on Donald Trump's watch, when he wasn't watching.
This brittle, defensive, angry old man is going to be the most powerful person in the world next month. I would suggest that the voters who voted for Joe Biden, thinking he would be this compassionate, wise alternative to mean bully Trump, did not have their facts together. Watch this angry, bitter old man and question whether this man is going to get us into another war. It's far more likely than what they accuse President Trump of getting us into another war with North Korea, Syria, Iran, China, or Russia. This old man is going to send your son or daughter into another pointless brushfire war, and it all could have been avoided by your vote on November 3rd.
It's still his responsibility as president to defend American interests for the next 4 weeks.
Now, what Biden's criticism about Trump needing to give a speech about the cyber attack, it actually makes sense when you consider how President Obama governed for 8 years. The way a President Obama press conference would go would be something like this. A reporter would raise an issue with President Obama very respectfully and say, "Mr. Obama, there is a problem out in this other country. What is your administration's response?" And then Obama would give a 30-minute answer about how he will have a team of experts looking into that. That would be the end of the question. The reporter would not have any challenging statement. The reporter would not argue with President Obama. And then, most importantly, a year later, 2 years later, there would never be any follow-up by that reporter, by that news agency, or by anyone asking whether Obama had solved the problem. The reporter would immediately report that Obama had solved the problem simply by saying, "We'll have experts look into that." And that would be the end of the topic, and it would never ever be investigated on 60 Minutes or Frontline or by the New York Times or the Washington Post. The matter was settled because Obama simply said he would have experts look at it, and it would never ever be followed up by any reporter ever again. So in Biden's world, the way that you would solve a problem like a cyber attack would be for President Trump to give a speech saying all the secret clandestine ways we're going to respond to this cyber attack, and then suddenly that would solve the problem. Of course, that's sophistry. There's no such thing as solving a cyber attack by giving a speech about it. But in Biden's world, all problems are solved by giving a speech on how you're going to take care of a problem. That's not the way the real world works, but that's the way it works in the apparently demented mind of the president-elect.
But rest assured that even if he does not take it seriously, I will.
Now, did Biden actually conceive of that criticism, that Donald Trump is not taking this cyber attack threat seriously? No. That was in the op-ed from 2 weeks ago, written by some New York Times reporter, snidely insinuating that Donald Trump did not care about this cyber attack. That was in the original article, and Joe Biden is repeating another man's thoughts, or another woman's thoughts, on how Trump conducted a dereliction of duty. So we're not even getting Joe Biden's thoughts on the matter. Someone else thought up this criticism for him. And it's very odd watching a president-elect talk about how he's going to fix all these problems, which are simply opinion columns based on anonymous sources.
I'm disappointed by the response of President Trump. I was pleased to see leaders in both parties in the Congress speak out loudly and clearly on this attack.
No, I'm just pretending to speak into a
Again, I want to thank prominent
talking.
Republicans in the Senate, particularly for speaking out. Confront these threats on a bipartisan basis with a united front here at home.
Again, why is this considered so important to Joe Biden? People are dying from coronavirus. He has a lot of things on his plate. Is he going to declare a nuclear war against Russia? Is he going to mobilize all of our forces in Germany to charge across the border and take out Russia? No? Then what is he talking about? Someone took a poll, someone went to a focus group, and they said, "Oh, you'll boost your poll numbers by 5%, President-elect Biden, if you moan about this for 5 minutes in a 10-minute speech."
That should be encouraging to the American people and a warning to our adversaries. In the meantime, the president's team for the next 4 weeks need to cooperate fully.
Now again, this is a brand new demand. There's no requirement in the Constitution of the United States for any outgoing president to cooperate on a single aspect of policy with the new administration coming in. Harry Truman found this out as vice president to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When Roosevelt died, he had Harry Truman completely cut out of all decision making. So when Truman came into office, he literally felt like all the stars of heaven had dropped onto him, because he was coming in from scratch with no transition at all. And there is nothing the Trump team owes to Joe Biden.
Which they haven't been doing is share information that becomes available on both the impact and our response.
But your team said that the Trump administration was lying from every aspect of the coronavirus and COVID response. You said they were lying about developing a vaccine when Donald Trump announced that vaccines would be on the way by Christmas. He announced that in July, and Kamala Harris and Andrew Cuomo went out and ridiculed Donald Trump's vaccine as something they wouldn't want to take. So your administration team, your transition team, hasn't given any reason for the Trump administration to cooperate with you.
To ensure a smooth transition to protect the American people.
Now, a mature adult, who Joe Biden is not, would have simply called President Trump and said, I need some transition assistance here on this, that, and the other agencies. Mr. President, can I get your assurance that we'll get a smooth transition? That would be handled in a private phone call. Joe Biden repeatedly attacks Donald Trump in this speech and then calls for a civil transition. You're going about that the wrong way, sir.
As administrations change, over the next month, I intend to continue focusing on building my team so that the right people are in place on day one of my administration to take over this effort.
People might wonder, why would you appoint someone like Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation? Cabinet position of Transportation Secretary has a lot to do with the socialist agenda of forcing Americans into mass transit in major cities. They want to make it illegal for you to drive a private car and to fine you if you're driving a private vehicle in a major city. By forcing Americans into mass transit, by forcing you to take a bus or whatever, or carpool, Democrats want to control how you go to work and how you enjoy your personal freedom. So many of these appointments to Biden's cabinet don't seem to make sense readily, but it will soon become clear. Biden's appointments to his administration are about controlling you and removing your freedom and assigning that power that you used to enjoy to the Democratic Party.
To prioritize cybersecurity across the board, and I'll consult with experts to plan for the steps that my administration will take in order to secure our systems, improve our cyber defenses, and to better withstand future attacks that we know will come.
Now, this is an amazing admission, and none of these reporters that ask him questions follow up on this. After spending the last 2 weeks criticizing Donald Trump for not giving a public speech on the precise counterattack that we are going to wage against the cyber attackers and the nation state that sponsored them, Joe Biden admits right here that he himself doesn't have such a plan, that he will in the future consult with experts to come up with a plan. So he criticized Trump for not stating what his counterattack would be. It's weeks later, and as he repeats his attacks against President Trump because someone told him to, Joe Biden admits right here he has no plan himself for what he would do. Why are you complaining about Trump not going into specifics if you don't have any specifics, sir?
And to impose costs on those who conduct them. And I fully expect bipartisan support from this based on what we've heard so far. Our adversaries are highly capable. Cyber threats are among the greatest threats to our...
Continually touches his face while warning us about maintaining our health.
Global security in the 21st century. And I believe we have to treat them with the same seriousness of purpose that we treated threats of other unconventional weapons.
Oh, you mean like the Wuhan flu, where China continued to allow international flights in and out of the airport in Wuhan province, while restricting all internal travel to and from Wuhan province, and disappearing all of the scientists related to that work from the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
We have to work with our allies to establish clear international rules and mechanisms to enforce them, and consequences for those countries that violate them.
Now, this is mindlessness. Joe Biden just said that if you hack our country in the future, he will coordinate with other countries in the world and tell the people conducting these hacks, you violated our rules. Well, the people who successfully carried out these cyber attacks are probably laughing themselves silly at Biden's ridiculous statement here. So you're going to go and tell the people that stole all of your secrets, we caught you. You violated the rules. Like that would in any way impinge on their ability to do that in the future.
I want to close with this. As I look at the first of what will be millions of vaccinations going in the arms of Americans,
I thank President Trump for Operation Warp Speed, which my Biden campaign ridiculed.
After hundreds, thousands of lives lost.
Now, he repeats this over and over, but we have similar numbers of people dying from the flu every year worldwide. Why is this so important to him to keep emphasizing the lives lost?
Congress finally passing an economic relief package after months and months of delay.
Again, that's a criticism of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She was the one who blocked any deals before the election.
And a new urgency for bipartisan approach to cybersecurity after years of a president who refused to stand up to our adversaries and hold them accountable.
Now, where did Biden get this particular criticism? Because we've seen President Trump criticized for 4 years for exactly that, holding our adversaries accountable, negotiating new trade deals, undoing the unfair trade deals that people like Joe Biden championed to put American workers out of work and to close our factories. President Trump held those accountable and brought these jobs back to America.
I'm reminded of the quote this season from a Jesuit priest named Alfred Delp. He wrote, quote, "Advent is a time for rousing." Delp believed at first we are shaken to our depths, and then we're ready for a season of hope.
So finally, we arrive at the season of hope after a promise of a winter of darkness and future darkness from President-elect Joe Biden.
As a nation, we've certainly been shaken to our depths this year.
Encouraged by Democrat politicians on every front to keep Americans frightened and in fear for the entire pandemic. When President Trump announced in July that we would have vaccines developed by the end of the year, it was important to the Democratic Party that Americans not gain hope from President Trump's announcement. Democrats required that every American citizen go to the polls on November 3rd, fearful and terrified that they would all die if President Trump remained in office. So when President Trump, at every turn in his daily CDC briefings, attempted to mollify the nation's fears and to unite us in presenting a united front against this virus, Democrats and their media allies attacked Trump at every turn because that was against their goal of frightening Americans to the polls. If Americans are reassured before November 3rd that our government is doing everything possible in the speediest way possible to save the lives of them and their loved ones, you don't go out and vote Democrat. That was the fear of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. Their goal was that if America was terrified of President Trump, that they would vote Democrat and put Joe Biden into office. Mission accomplished. But the price that this is paid in terms of frightening your grandmother, frightening your grandfather, frightening your parents, terrifying every person in the country to vote for Joe Biden. Make no mistake, Joe Biden's entire 2020 presidential campaign was based on the notion that America had to stay divided, had to stay afraid in order to put him in office on the November 3rd election. Uniting America before the election ran contrary to the goals of the Democratic Party and the Hollywood media complex.
Now it's time to awaken, to get moving, time for hope. We've gotten through tough times before in this nation.
You can hear it from him right there. Once the election is won, now you can start talking about hope. But he just talked about how darker days are ahead, so I'm not sure who came up with this mixed message from his team.
Through these difficult times as well. And we'll do it by coming together.
So the speech starts talking about darkness and darker days ahead of us, and then he tries to wrap up with a message of hope. Now, why is it important for Americans to still be afraid and terrified as the Biden administration comes in? Because the longer that Democrats keep you afraid, the more leverage they have at the negotiating table when negotiating with their enemy, that being the Republican Party. So in Joe Biden's world, his party can only expand their power if America stays afraid. If America is united, he would not keep agitating for fear and terror across America in order to get the legislative agenda that he wants once he takes office. But his team has emphasized to him that you have to talk about darkness so we can get what we want when you take office, and then pretend we're also offering hope. Now, as a preview, why is this speech before he even takes office? Why does this matter? Why is this important? You're getting a preview for how Joe Biden is going to govern. First, he will call for unity. Then he'll say, "You're going to die unless the Republicans in Congress do precisely what I want." Then, if he has any setbacks, if he has any problems, 6 months from now, a year from now, or the next presidential election, his team will then be able to say, "Oh, the Republicans stopped me from saving your grandma. Your grandma died because of the Republican Congress." And this is a very easy tactic by the Biden team. They said all year for 2020 that Donald Trump killed your grandma because he's such a big meanie. So then Biden, once he's in office and Donald Trump is gone from public life, he will continue that same attack with any Republicans in Congress. He'll say, "Mitch McConnell killed your grandma," or "Senator so-and-so killed your grandma." And this will never end. Biden's claim of unity and hope is a lie. He will continue the demagoguing and division of this country if his team believes it will increase the power of the Democratic Party.
By working with one another, by being, you've heard me say many times, but we are at our best, the United States of America. There are certain things that rise way above partisan differences that threaten the United States. There are national security interests that require us to cooperate. And I'm confident we'll be able to do that. After a year of pain and loss, it's time to unite, to heal.
It's time to unite after he's safely been elected. But he needed you terrified through November 3rd in order to gain that power. Power is all the Democratic Party respects. Yeah, it's disgusting.
To rebuild. For all those who are suffering right now, who've had enormous loss, and lie awake at night wondering what tomorrow's bring, I'd say, well, God bless you all, and I promise you, we're going to continue to push as hard as we can.
You're a complete liar, sir. You wanted America terrified and afraid so they would show up to vote for you. And that is why your team and the news media did everything they could to ridicule, mock, and attack every single effort that President Trump did to fight this virus and to present a united front across the country. You did not want national unity before November 3rd because that would have conflicted with your goals of obtaining absolute power. Power is what you craved, and power is what you receive.
To finish the job. May God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to you all. Now I'll be happy to take some questions.
All right, so this concludes part one. Part two, we're going to go into the Q&A section of Biden's holiday speech. Now, did you really feel that sentiment there of him wishing you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays? Wow, you can just feel the love and unity from this guy, can't you? Thank you, and we'll see you in part two, the Q&A for Biden's holiday speech. Special guest commentary by my assistant. Thank you.